Welcome to the Living After Faith podcast, a podcast designed to help you as you leave religion and move forward with your life. We are the official podcast of RecoveringReligionists.com, a recovery group founded by Dr. Darrell Ray, the author of The God Virus. We welcome your feedback. You can contact us by going to livingafterfaith.com and facebook.com/livingafterfaith and follow us on Twitter at LAFwithme. And now, here's today's program on Living After Faith with Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
And I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
Come laugh with me.
So today we are talking to the lovely and talented Vyckie Garrison. She is the head of NoLongerQuivering.com, which is a site for people who have gotten out of the Quiverful and similar movements. And she also has the Take Heart Project, which is a nonprofit set to help women to escape from those environments. Vyckie, we are so excited to talk to you. I know you told me that one of your Twitter followers had said you had to get a hold of us and come on our show. And likewise, our listeners got a hold of us and said, you guys have to talk to Vyckie. So here we are together. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Here we are.
So I was reading one of your posts at NoLongerQuivering.com, and I'll put a link up for everybody to listen, to read. And you mentioned that your childhood was kind of rough. You had sort of a hard family life and an early marriage. Could you tell us just a little bit about that and maybe how that might have led into where you ended up in the Quiverful movement?
My childhood was extremely unstable, and my start into adulthood was just, I had no confidence in my decision-making abilities. I had no real idea of a direction in life because I really had not seen or witnessed adults making good choices. And so I was lost. And, you know, when somebody came along, it was actually through the radio, Christian radio station in Nevada. And it was through that I learned, you know, they talked about being lost and needing a savior. And that was something that made a lot of sense to me. I was desperately looking for direction because, as I said, growing up, you know, my mother, bless her heart, she is a wonderful woman and had tried her best, but she too just was doing, you know, the best that she could.
So you mentioned that actually that your mom worked in a casino and she worked at night and slept all day, so that made it so you had not a lot of supervision?
Yes, we pretty much raised ourselves, and I raised my older siblings, actually, because I always felt like the responsible one. I felt like, and my mother used to call me the preacher because even though we weren't, you know, by any means a Christian home, and yet somehow I had that idea that, you know, God was watching us and we really needed to get our acts together. And so I would preach to everyone, especially about the smoking or about the drugs. I was the little moralist in my home.
I could understand that. I was like that when I was younger as well. Not so much preachy, but definitely the moralist. My parents smoked when I was really young, so I used to give them a lot of crap.
Yeah, it's really ironic later. Because once I got out on my own and was, you know, building my own life, I made every mistake that, you know, I got married young. I got married at 16. And the only reason I did it is because I was too intimidated to actually tell this guy that I didn't want to get married. I mean, he was abusive from the beginning. But I ended up getting married at 16, and we actually were homeless for a while because he couldn't get a job because of his earring and his long hair and his tattoo, and plus, you know, just laziness and being on the drugs. And so I was supporting him, and, you know, the whole thing was just, it was just insane. And I just felt like my life, you know, I wanted something better, but I could not even picture what that would be like. I had no clue what a good positive direction for myself. I didn't understand about goals. I just was, because I guess I just really didn't have a lot of adult wisdom being shared with me as a child. I don't know. It was crazy.
It sounds like it.
It was something that made it I really feel like I was, because of my background, I was just kind of set up to fall very hard for Christianity and for that, especially the fundamentalist form of Christianity, which really has all the answers. Everything is spelled out, black and white, chapter and verse. It made it so simple. I could, say, what should I do? Well, there's a verse for that. And there were pastors, there were, all these godly teachers who would tell you, and of course I started out in a pretty mainstream evangelical. It was Assemblies of God, but still not quite to the fundamentalist extreme. When I first got into Christianity, it was more about, following Jesus, loving your neighbor, all those good positive character qualities and good values. And so I went for that. But I was so serious about it. I was so meticulously wanting to just do my very, very best for God. Not that I thought that I understood about grace. I understood about unmerited favor and all that you can't earn God's love. I knew that God loved me unconditionally, whatever. But as a response to that, I really wanted to do my very best for God. I wanted to show my appreciation. And so I just dug into the Bible more and more. And when I got what really hooked me into the Quiverful movement was when I started homeschooling. I started homeschooling really on a fluke because my daughter just happened to not be old enough to start kindergarten, but she was already reading. And so the pastor's wife suggested that I try homeschooling for a year just to see. And so I did. And that was really where I encountered the very extreme Quiverful teachings, the godly family values, biblical family values. And there's a lot of teaching on biblical womanhood, God's plan for us as women and as mothers and as wives. And that was where I really got hooked.
Yeah, it sounds like that would be really easy to fall into, because at first you were feeling very lost, as the song goes, and then you were found, and so you were very very strong in your beliefs and very strong in wanting to make things right after having seen things go wrong. It's something Rich talks about too, is that it's very easy to get sucked into basically cult-like environments when you've had a rough time, when things have been painful, when you feel like you don't know what to do and where to go. All of a sudden, there's this group that takes you in, they love bomb you, they show you what to do, and little by little, they tell you all the rules and how to get along so that you are as perfect as you can be, and then life is going to be awesome.
Exactly. And my life had been such chaos, and nothing solid for me to grasp onto or to, nowhere to get a firm footing or a grip on my life. And so when I encountered Christianity and the Bible, I went wholeheartedly. I loved it because now I had a direction, I had a purpose, I had answers. And that to me was security. It was just this safety and this feeling of, okay, I know what I need to do. And that really appealed to me. It's like, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that was the story of my Christian life.
Just like my sweet husband here, I noticed that you're not the kind of person who does anything halfway. When you were homeschooling, home birthing, and home churching, according to your recent post, you published a pro-life, pro-family Christian newspaper. Tell us about that a little bit. That sounds kind of interesting.
It started out really as a way to make a living, help my husband make a living to support our growing family. Because when you get into the whole Quiverful ideal of trusting the Lord with your family planning, and you've got all these children coming, and you as a woman, you're not really supposed to go outside the home to work to earn an income. And so it was all on my husband to get that taken care of. The thing is, he was blind and really didn't have the skills or the education. And so I just, as a helpmeet to my husband, like I was taught to do, I started a newspaper and I made him the president. And the reason that we chose the pro-life, pro-family theme for our newspaper was because as Christians, as evangelical Christians, we had been hearing a lot about politics and about dominionism and being able to, really influence the future of the country. We were influenced by Dave Barton of Wall Builders and Gary DeMar of American Vision. And so, even Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council, we were getting that information and we were very concerned about pro-life issues. And, of course, they really create this atmosphere of fear where there's this big evil world out there that wants to suck you in and destroy your faith, wants to attack your children and, basically turn them into little secular humanists. And
oh, no.
Yeah, and especially, once we got into the homeschooling, that mindset is so prevalent. The public schools, we viewed them as Satan's indoctrination centers, and what they really wanted was just to get a hold of your kids' minds and turn them into little robots who would, eventually become atheists. And so there's like this big fear of the world, and there's all these scary phantoms that are made larger than life in the evangelical mind. We were afraid of the homosexuals and the lesbians and the feminists and the atheists and the secular humanists and Muslims. I mean, you name it, and there was just an enemy that was out there ready to attack and destroy your home and pull your family apart. And so the homeschooling seemed the logical way to insulate our children and to protect them from all of those evil influences. And we really were strongly influenced by James Dobson and his organization to become very involved in biblical family values, promoting biblical family values within the government, within the media, entertainment, and education. That was really the start of our newspaper.
And having your own newspaper, you could, spend your time studying the things that you were going to be studying anyways, and then take those and turn them into articles and publish it. I could imagine that.
It was a perfect fit, and especially because of the location where we're at in northeast Nebraska is an extremely conservative community. And so I don't know that it would have went over anywhere else as well as it did here, but we were able to support our family of 9, pretty comfortably with the income that we brought in.
Yeah, it seems like I've seen a lot in environments like that you hear there's, the Christian radio station in the area. So the Christian newspaper, you've got kind of a, you're the only source for that one channel. So you can kind of, have your audience all right there and not worry about competition.
Yeah, it really went over well here, which we considered that the Lord's blessing. We said, here he is providing, because how else, obviously it had to have been God, because how else could, I had dropped out of high school. I finally went back and got my diploma, but then I dropped out of college too so I could have babies. And, my husband's on disability. And, from a logical point of view, you would think there's no way we could support all these kids. But here we were doing it without me having to go work outside the home. And so that was just confirmation to us that we were doing God's will. And like the Bible says, I've never seen a righteous man forsaken or his children begging for bread. It's like, see there, we're living proof that verse is true.
Right.
So everything was going good. What led to you leaving that? How did the breakdown, what happened?
The more convinced that we became of the biblical family's quiverful kind of lifestyle, we just threw ourselves wholeheartedly into that. And so we were having all of these children. We were homeschooling all of them. We were home churching, and we had really managed to isolate ourselves because we had this mindset that we really needed to, be in like-minded fellowship, that we needed to protect our children from the influence of kids who were public schooled. And so we really got to the point where the only people that we really associated with were other Quiverful families, which really narrowed our social circle. And we became more and more kind of ingrown to where it was home everything, homeschool, home birth, home church, home business. And it's interesting because we subscribed to a magazine, a homeschool magazine called the Homeschool Digest. It's the quarterly journal for serious homeschoolers. And I loved that magazine. It was my favorite because every time I would get it in the mail, there was some new teaching that was just radical. When we first started homeschooling, we thought that was radical, but we had no idea just how peculiar we were going to become. And so it was kind of this mixed feelings when I go, get that magazine in the mailbox, because on the one hand, I'm excited for, what's the Lord going to show us next that, will help us in our Christian walk, help us to be more and more conformed to the image of Christ and to that vision of, of a truly godly biblical family. And yet at the same time, everything that we implemented into our lives that way just made our lives more and more demanding, more and more difficult, more and more isolated. And the pressure, was like, it was really tough. And because of my enthusiasm, I really believed that what I was doing was the very best for God. It was the very most scriptural, the closest to what the Bible actually teaches about family. And because I had that conviction, that very strong conviction that this was right, this was the best, it got me up in the mornings, and it really enabled me. Of course, I attributed all of that to the power of Christ and the Holy Spirit living within me to be able to, accomplish all that I was doing. We were the most productive family, and I'm not talking just children. We're doing this newspaper. We're, working within our community.
You won an award too, didn't you, for your family's efforts?
Yes, in 2003, we were recognized as the Nebraska Family of the Year by Nebraska Family Council's Salt and Light Awards, and the Nebraska Family Council, of course, is the local affiliate of the Family Research Council, focus on the family's political arm. And so, we really felt like, we were making a difference. We were being salt and light. We were being a witness to the world of what a truly godly home was like. And yet, it's interesting because 3 weeks after we were awarded that Family of the Year, I had my seventh child, and that delivery was a disaster. All of my pregnancies and deliveries were very difficult. They were all high risk because I had some health issues to begin with, and that really exacerbated my problems. And then my deliveries, they were all complicated. They were C-sections, and just everything that could go wrong always did go wrong. But with my seventh pregnancy, when I went into labor, I had really gotten so into this mindset of home everything. I was going to just have an unassisted home birth in my bathtub. That's what I had planned.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. and despite the fact that I'd had 4 C-sections, but yet, then I went on to have 2 natural deliveries, and so I thought, I'll be fine. I don't even need a midwife. I'm just going to do this myself, which was insane. But when I actually did go into labor, I had this feeling just very strong that something was wrong. Mm-hmm. And amazingly, I actually listened to myself, because Quiverful teaches you not to listen to your intuition. But amazingly, I actually did listen to myself, and I told my husband I need to go to the hospital. And when I got there, it turns out that I was in the process of having a uterine rupture.
Oh my goodness.
Almost lost the baby and me. And so it was a very difficult delivery. I ended up with another C-section, and I just did not recover from that. It took me a month even to wake up. It just physically wiped me out. And in that state, in that poor physical state, I just could not keep juggling. I get a picture of the Chinese acrobats who, are spinning those plates, and they got like dozens of them all going at once. And that was me. But once my health failed me, I couldn't keep them all in the air at the same time. And it all came kind of tumbling down because I could not keep up with the lifestyle. It was just too much.
Yeah, it sounds like you were doing everything.
Yeah, and everything the hard way. I mean, I couldn't just have, feed my children whole wheat bread. I had to actually bake the bread from wheat that I had, ground from scratch. It was, everything is done the most, plain and simple, back to the old ways, the old paths. And so, since we didn't believe in youth groups, we didn't believe in, public school or even sleepovers, or, it's like no break from the kids. They were constantly here. We were constantly involved in every little detail of their lives. It was a huge, huge amount of responsibility.
So that caused you to start rethinking all of your responsibilities in your lifestyle. You said, oh my gosh, I can't do this fully anymore. Did that cause like a full-on retreat, or was it just kind of little things that started changing in your mind?
What made the real difference for me was the response of my children. My children were not doing well. They were not thriving. And I could see that a huge part of that was that my husband had just turned into this tyrant. He was a micromanager. He kind of had those tendencies to begin with, but at the beginning of our marriage, when we kind of had the whole equality thing, I could kind of check that and say, you're just being picky and you need to chill. But the more that we got into the patriarchal teachings, that a woman needs to submit, that the man needs to take charge, he needs to be the leader. And what they teach in the Quiverful movement, and really it's just a general Christian teaching. Most evangelicals will say that, yes, the husband is to be the leader of his home. Well, the Quiverful people take that to the extreme, so that they teach that a man is ultimately responsible, eternally responsible for the spiritual well-being of his wife and children. And that's a huge weight for a man to have to carry around. My husband took that responsibility very seriously, and he was listening to a lot of these biblical family patriarchal sort of teachers, such as Doug Phillips and Jonathan Linval, S.M. Davis. And what they really teach a man is that along with that responsibility for their family's spiritual well-being comes an authority. They have authority over their wives and over their children. And, a lot of that comes from Bill Gothard, who is one of the founders of the whole Quiverful movement, who teaches about the umbrella of authority, and that God has established, a hierarchy in which the husband, God, of course, is over all, and then the husband is his appointed authority. The wife is under that, and then the children come under. And as long as you are within proper authority, as long as you are respecting and obeying your godly appointed authority, then you've got the spiritual covering, which is supposed to protect you from the attacks of Satan. And so this teaching really gave my husband the inspiration that he needed to go all out with his kind of micromanaging tendencies. And he really felt that it was his place to be involved in every detail of our lives, down to our thoughts and our, even what we said, what we did, all of it came under his jurisdiction. And so that kind of scrutiny was really driving us all crazy. And my children didn't respond very well. They became bitter. They became, it kind of just shut down. I remember there were days when I didn't even remember my older son speaking all day. And that, because his dad was blind, that was kind of his way of staying off of his father's radar, was just to be quiet so he couldn't hear him, out of hearing, out of mind kind of thing. But it was really pathetic because I would see my children, they started out as these joyful, happy, bubbly little kids. My one daughter, I even nicknamed her Happiness because she was just all smiles all the time. But day by day, over the years, I could see that spirit just kind of dying within them, and they became lifeless. They became soulless, and they were just little automatons who walked around going, "Yes, Dad," because that was the only way that they could have any peace. And that was the thing that was really, I couldn't tolerate that. And so I started thinking, this isn't working. This isn't working out for us. And of course I tried harder. Of course I was searching for that key, that, missing element that would make this all work for us. I discovered the Duggar family. I saw a TV special where, they look like the perfect family. And I was just in awe of Michelle Duggar and seeing how she had her home just completely, perfectly organized. Everything was running smoothly. Her older daughters seemed to just be happily serving their younger siblings, and they, had no complaints. They were efficient. They were doing everything, and, willingly, just joyfully. And I thought, wow, what is the key to that? How is she doing that? So I started doing research, and I found out that they follow Bill Gothard and the Institute for Biblical Life Principles. Their curriculum that they use in homeschooling is ATI, which is Advanced Training Institute. And I thought, I need to get that. That'll be the thing that'll make this finally work for our family. But I found out that that's really an expensive curriculum. I couldn't afford that. So I went ahead and got what I could afford, which was Bill Gothard's character studies. And we tried to implement that. It was constantly, looking for more resources. It became a very expensive quest for me to just find a way to really make the whole patriarchal setup work for our family. But it never did. It was always this tension. It was always this stress. It never flowed for us. And that was the thing that really made me search more and more.
I can understand the stress of having a father who is, verbally abusive, and, definitely you have to walk on eggshells around. I experienced that.
The hard part about it was that he's not an asshole. He's a nice guy. He loved his kids.
Right.
It's just that he had it in his mind that he had this responsibility for every little detail. And so it really put him in a position of trying to, basically play God for all of us. And he was not cut out for that kind of responsibility. And
I'm pretty sure none of us are.
Tried his best.
Yeah.
But he drove us all crazy with it.
Yeah. I could. One thing that you said that really resonated, and I also saw it in this most recent blog post, as that these Tea Party family values are the fundamentalists' desperate attempt to deny their own imperfections, vulnerability, and their inescapable mortality. And what it sounds like you saw that in the Duggar family in their show, that, they really do put forth this face that, like, everything is perfect. Everything's working wonderfully. There's nothing wrong with our lifestyle and having, lots of children and patriarchal demands where, there's, in fact, this is better than everybody else because you can see we're totally happy. And it seems like that kind of attitude can cover up a lot of unhappiness and a lot of, bad situations for everyone. Did you see that as well?
Oh, yes. And we were very concerned about projecting a good witness. That was part of our testimony for Christ, was, to show the world how when you follow biblical values, when you follow the biblical blueprint for families, then God is going to honor that. He's going to bless it, and everything is going to work out just lovely. And so if if there's a crack in that, if you say, well, we've got this problem or that, what you're really doing is, dishonoring Christ or disproving the Word of God. And we didn't want to, have anything to do with that. And so, of course, we put on our best face, and of course, when we were Family of the Year, I'm sure that, we gave the impression that, just like the Duggars, that this big happy family where everything was just working out so lovely, and aren't they just a wonderful, wonderful family? And yet, what was going on within our home was just constant stress, constant tension. It was a very difficult and very joyless lifestyle. I mean, I remember, towards the end when I was really questioning things, I picked up the Bible, and for some reason I just was really drawn to the book of Ecclesiastes, because it's a very stark kind of, reality-based, it just starts out vanity of vanities, and I was thinking, I don't know, it spoke to me. And I got to one part in there, and there's a verse that says, it is the gift of God that a man should enjoy the fruits of his labor. And of course, that word labor really caught my attention, because I had a lot of experience. I knew all about labor. Yeah, okay. And to me, in my mind, the fruits of my labor were my children. And I just realized that, I am not enjoying my children at all, because I'm so worn down, I'm so drug out, I am so stressed. My kids are not a sort, the Bible verse that Quiverful is based on is Psalm 127, where it says, lo, children are a blessing from the Lord. I didn't feel blessed. I just felt stressed. I felt exhausted. I felt so stretched out and so worn out and used up. There was nothing left of me, and there was no joy at all.
You started with the Bill Gothard system and trying to get that stuff and trying to improve your family's life to make things a little more joyful. And so I'm guessing that probably didn't quite work out.
Yeah, my children never did take to it. They were resistant. And when I look back now, I think good for them. That was a healthy response that my children had, because they did not submit to it. They did not, when I see the Duggar girls on television, and their whole life is they're fulfilling their parents' vision, and they're completely compliant. And, at least what we see on television, mm-hmm. They go for it. They think it's wonderful, and they're all on board. And I think, to me, that is kind of a scary thing, because it shows that they don't have that sense of self-preservation. I felt like, I can look back and I can see now that what my kids were doing by resisting and by not complying was they were standing up for their own individuality. They were standing up and saying, I am a person and I matter, and I want to have my own opinions. I want to make my own decisions. I want to be in charge of my own life. And really, that was a good thing. Of course, in my Quiverful mindset, it was disaster because if they didn't accept it, the whole thing is about the kids and, raising up joyful, committed Christians who will, be mature workers in the Lord's, in the harvest field when they grow up. And that wasn't happening. And so I just felt like a failure. Like I hadn't managed to make it work. I felt like, here we've got the perfect recipe, biblical family principles, and we're putting, using all the best ingredients, and I'm going, perfectly according to the directions, and yet what's coming out isn't what I was promised. It doesn't look like the picture, in the recipe book. And so it just made me think, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? what finally happened, though, is I came in contact with my father to begin with, which I hadn't talked to him. I don't know. I could never remember him. I was like 2 when he left. But I found him on the internet. I called him up and started talking to him. And it turns out that he's, nice guy. He's living in Arkansas. He has a, wife and family. He's been married for over 30 years. And he's a Christian. And so that was all great. So I felt like that was a way of me, kind of in along lines of the patriarchal thing. I'm honoring my father and obviously being a blessing to him, because here, he discovers that he's got this long lost daughter who's, married and happily, serving the Lord, 7 children, etc. But 3 years after I met him, I had an opportunity to go to Arkansas and meet the rest of his family. And I met an uncle, my Uncle Ron, who was not a believer. And I had been warned, that he was a tricky guy, and I really should just not engage with him because, I was told that he would lead me astray, which I thought was, phooey, because I was such a dedicated Christian. I was so into it, and I understood my apologetics. I was a student of the Word. I knew my Bible. I had this very deep, very personal, intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. I had testimony after testimony of the Lord working in my life. I was so solid in my Christian walk and in my relationship with the Lord that there was no way that some, atheist was going to touch that. So I did not shy away. I didn't try to, protect myself or whatever. When I met my uncle, there was like this instant connection. I don't know, something about the two of us. We just, hit it off. We started talking and we couldn't stop, and we were just, friends immediately. And when I got back from that vacation, I had an email in my inbox, and my uncle said, wow, I was really impressed with your family. I could see that you're genuine people, that you really, are trying to be countercultural. You're trying to, not go with the flow. And I'd like to know more about you. Would you be interested in, exchanging an email or two? Well, that turned into like 1,000 emails. It was this obsession because amazingly, I was able to talk with my uncle, and, in the Quiverful home church world, whatever, the women just don't talk to men other than their husbands. And they don't talk about really any theology, any philosophy, anything that is really very, thought-provoking. Basically, what would happen in our home church is after the meeting, the women would go to the kitchen and talk about homeschooling, talk about having children, talk about child training, that sort of thing, while the men were out in the living room talking about doctrine and theology and philosophy. And, I would sit in the kitchen and I'd be having this conversation, and that was all fine and interesting, but one ear was just straining because I wanted to know what those guys were talking about. That was all so interesting to me. So when I got this chance to talk to my uncle, and nobody could really tell me no because it's, he's my uncle. And so I just went for it, and I just became obsessed. I don't think I was obsessed with my uncle so much as I was obsessed with my own thoughts, because it gave me an opportunity to finally start thinking again, to go back over what I believed, why I believed it, and really reevaluate everything. And it was a process that opened my eyes to just start thinking again. I had really shut that down and had just been doing rather than thinking.
Nice. Yeah, that must have been a huge relief to be able to get that going again. So
I ate it up. I was at my computer, and it was funny because, my uncle was never adversarial about it. He didn't want to deconvert me or convince me of anything. He just wanted to have a conversation. And that was my thing too. And in our letters and our actual writing back and forth, there was not a whole lot of, we discussed things, but it wasn't, point for point. And when we did get into that, it was annoying. But basically, for my own self, I was thinking, just in case he does bring this up, I want to be ready. I want to have answers. And so it made me start digging. And I got out all of my old Christian apologetic books, Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict, and I was reading, brushing up with Ravi Zacharias and Norman Geisler and all of these, popular Christian apologists. Dr. Walter Martin, the Bible Answer Man. I actually got saved listening to his program on the radio. But anyway, so I'm reading over all of this stuff, and all of a sudden it just wasn't, when I'm trying to look at it from an outside perspective, from like maybe how it would sound to my uncle, and I realized it's really not all that convincing. So then I dug even deeper, and I started getting into, like some old European scholars and stuff, and even that didn't really convince me. And so I finally got to the point where I was just scrambling for answers. I realized, that I am a fundamentalist, and it was, it was eye-opening to me to just kind of look at my viewpoint from sort of an outsider's perspective and see just how bizarre it really was.
Wow. I noticed, I think I read actually one of your blog posts that's all about that exchange with your uncle. So I will try and dig that up and put a link
on it, because
that sounds like it was a really important part of your deconversion process, of your starting to see things differently.
I have a blog post up. I'm pretty sure it's still up there, called "I Am Not Trapped." And if you can find that one, in that I wrote a letter to my uncle after I came to this point where I realized that I didn't believe everything that I had. I had based my life on the Bible, and all of a sudden I had no confidence in the Bible whatsoever. And I was even starting to realize that there was some really twisted stuff in there, and it was, not a good book. And yet here I had built my whole life on it, and it was just like there was this period that was intensely scary and confusing. It was like the collapse of my world. And I remember, I actually wrote a letter to my uncle, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know who I am. Everybody else thinks I'm this, good, godly Christian mother, and yet I don't even believe in God. So, but it was very intense. It really was, just trying to sort that all through.
How is life today? Where are you now? And are you comfortable with the decisions you've made and where you are?
Yeah, it's been a process, and it's been an interesting process. I remember when I was a fundamentalist Christian sitting in church, and the pastor said, "I don't have the faith to be an atheist." And quoting Francis Schaeffer, he said, "Atheists have both feet firmly planted in midair." And I thought that was really clever, at the time. But then I found myself in this position where I really understood that feeling, because it was like everything that, my whole foundation, everything that I had built my life on, that, my hope is built on solid rock, the solid rock, and it was gone. I didn't have that foundation. And it was really kind of like going back to square one where I had started. And so there were times where it was just exhilarating, where, it was like being in a free fall. There was nothing to hold me back or inhibit me, or, basically I was able to think for myself. I could, think whatever I wanted, do what I wanted. And it was like this whole rediscovery of, okay, so who am I? What do I like? What is important to me? It was wonderful. It was just exhilarating. And yet there were other times where I just, I feel myself just falling, and I like somewhere, I'm sure that I'm going to hit the ground. It's going to be this, huge splat. That didn't happen, but it was a very scary and very exciting time. And where I finally ended up, and it was, took time, and it was through a process, but I finally came to the point where I really can live with ambiguity. I don't have to have all of the answers, and I actually kind of enjoy the mystery of it. I don't know, I don't believe that there is a God. I know there's not that Christian God, the Bible God. And I don't know why we're here, I don't have all those answers. I don't have that, absolute direction or purpose for my life, but it means that I kind of get to invent it for myself, and I'm liking that.
It's wonderful. Absolutely. Are you and your kids still living together, and your husband, did he make the journey with you?
No, I ended up divorced, and that was kind of a rash decision. Not that I think it was a wrong decision, but at that point, when I realized that I didn't believe everything that I had based my life on, all of the, the Bible on which I got my biblical family values and all of that, I didn't believe it anymore. And I was just like, my health was so bad. I should have been hospitalized by that point. I had been so, my health had been so compromised because of all of the stress on my body physically, and then also the emotional and mental stress, that I had to cut back. And that was what I cut. I was having to deal with my husband. And so I just, I divorced him. I got custody of my kids, and I just wanted to focus on getting them back on track, because I could see that they were, they really were not thriving. They were really failing in a lot of areas. And so I wanted to just, what little bit of energy I had left, I wanted to concentrate it on being able to get them help. And that's what I did. I put them all in public school, which was a huge decision for me.
Wow.
But it was like, because I had spent all those years thinking of public school as Satan's indoctrination center, just all the evil and everything. And also, just because my children had become so isolated, they really had no friends. They had no social interactions. And so I was afraid, it's kind of like taking your kid and throwing them out in the middle of the ocean and saying sink or swim. I was afraid that's what I was doing to them. But they thrived. My kids just came alive in that environment. They loved going to school, and all of the opportunities that they have now just to be able to make friends, the social life, they eat it up, the intellectual, they do great in the academics. They like being able to encounter different viewpoints, different ideas, and, to sort that through and think it through, and just learning things. And they are starting to have some confidence in the various areas, that they're getting into, in sports or in dance and, theater, those kind of things. It's just been really good for them to be able to, go through that same process of going, okay, who am I? What are my interests? What do I want to do with my life? And just having that possibility, because before they had their entire futures already prepackaged and handed to them. This is what God wants for you, and this is what your life is going to look like, and here's what you're going to do, and, et cetera. And now all of a sudden that was all gone, and it was their lives are their own. And they really took to that. They like the fact that they can make choices, they can make decisions, they can have opinions and preferences, and, it's like opening up the whole world to them.
That's so wonderful to hear it. It honestly, this brings a tear to my eye to hear that you guys are all finding your own happiness and your own paths. And
it's wonderful, and it's been crazy. It's been, chaos, because we went from a very strict, very regimented, micromanaged little system where everything had a place, everything had was to be done this way. We had a schedule on our refrigerator that we got through one of the homeschool resources called Managers of Their Homes, and on our schedule, it had every person's day planned out down to 15-minute increments.
Oh, my God.
It was crazy. And really, to go from that to just kind of wide open whatever was my motto for a long time. Because, it's not like I came out of it and all of a sudden had this replacement system of, this is what we're going to do now instead. Right. I was just kind of blank. I was like, I have no idea. And so my kids, they were on that path with me. and so they started experimenting, and they're just like, they didn't know, they didn't have any direction. It was a very confusing, I don't know if it was confusing as much as it was just like kind of like going to Disneyland and going, where do we start?
That's a wonderful way to look at it. Yeah. I love it.
I did want to talk about what Quiverful teaches a woman to feel about herself, because, I really did not have any kind of direction as far as my purpose as a woman. I remember when I got into college and I started realizing that I'm actually kind of smart. I was getting a 4.0 in every class. And I realized that I could do anything I wanted. And I started looking at the courses that were available, what did I want to major in? And everything was interesting to me. I wanted to do it all. And so then I kind of felt like, it's a tyranny of choice of, just not really knowing where to start. And so when I got into the whole fundamentalist, Bible-believing kind of mindset and became more fundamentalist, what I learned is that God has a specific role for women. And this is what Quiverful teaches. Mary Pride started it really with her book, The Way Home, and All the Way Home, Beyond Feminism and Back to Reality is the subtitle of her book. Or, Nancy Campbell teaches in Above Ruby's magazine, The Power of Womanhood, The Power of Motherhood. And what they're saying is that God created women specifically to assist Adam, assist the husband in fulfilling his dominion mandate. And the way you do that is, number one, by producing children for him, and secondly, by being his helpmeet. And by that, we were taught that means that, God is going to give a vision and a plan, a goal for the husband, and his family is really there, especially his wife and also the children, to assist him in accomplishing the Lord's will for his life. And so basically, you're living for that man and helping him. And what it, of course, as a woman, you want to react against that and say no. But there were so many Bible verses that we encountered, where we were taught that the Bible teaches that a woman is more susceptible to deception. A woman is naturally more inclined to want to usurp authority and to, just be in rebellion against God. And so I really came to not trust my own intuition, my own feelings. The Bible says that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And I believe that my heart, more than anyone, wanted to deceive me. And so it got to the point where it was almost like an anti-indicator for me. If I felt that something was right or if something made sense to me, I would do the opposite, because I figured that must be my own selfishness, or that must be Satan deceiving me or whatever. And so I really came to that point where, as a woman, I just felt that the only safety I had was to rely on the authority of the man that God appointed in my life.
Wow. To not be able to even trust if you think 1 + 1 is 2, and then go, wait a second, if I think that, it must be wrong.
Exactly. That is to the point that I was. And, it's interesting because I've encountered so many women, Quiverful women, who are coming out of it through the No Longer Quivering website. When I first started that site, I thought I was the only one, but we've had, it started out a trickle of, here's another woman, here's another who are leaving or who have left. And now it's kind of become a flood. I'm just constantly meeting new women, and they all say the same thing. I just learned to not trust myself at all. It's all about self-abnegation. It's about, you can't even say, what do I think? Because there's supposed to be no you, no self entering into the equation. That's why No Longer Quivering, our subtitle of the site, is there is no you in quivering, because you're just really not supposed to consider yourself at all. Which is why, even when I had those high-risk pregnancies and I was putting my life on the line, it really did not enter my mind to go, wait a minute, what about me? I need to protect my health. But because, Mary Pride in her book, she talks about, missionaries go into the field. They're knowingly putting their lives at risk all the time to witness to the natives, and yet, we admire them and we don't think they're crazy, but yet a woman, who might be risking her health, she says, if you do end up dying in childbirth, then that makes you a martyr, and God promises a special crown.
Oh my goodness.
I actually bought into that, and that's what I was thinking when I was putting my life on the line every time with those pregnancies, and I really did come close on several occasions to just losing my life.
Yeah, it sounds like you pretty much were right on death's door with that very last pregnancy, and I'm so glad that you went to the hospital, that you got help, because, if you hadn't had that happen and hadn't lived through it, all the women that you're helping now wouldn't have you as such a wonderful, experienced resource. And Vyckie, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today. This has been amazingly moving, amazingly incredible. It's so great to be able to hear your story, and please keep up the good work.
Yes, and thanks for the opportunity just to spread the word about this movement, because it is definitely growing in America because of the current political and social climate. The evangelicals are kind of fearful of the future, and that makes them kind of bunker down, and then they start homeschooling. And once they start homeschooling, they kind of get hooked into the whole quiverful philosophy.
Yeah, when I first encountered the show about the Duggars, I thought, what's this quiverful thing? Oh, it just means they have a lot of kids. Well, that's wacky, but, not particularly harmful. But the more I learn, the more I think we do need to spread the word about how bad this movement is for women, for children, and even for the men in the movement.
Yes, absolutely. And the scary thing about it is when you look at the actual quiverful teachings, I don't believe that they are an aberration of mainstream, what the majority of the evangelical population already believes. It's just that quiverful actually takes it seriously and lives it to the extreme. It's taking regular Christianity and Christian thought and living it out to its logical conclusions.
Yeah, I will say it is biblical. I mean, there's plenty of biblical background for it. And that's one of the things I think that a lot of people don't realize is, they look at it and they think, oh, that's just off the wall extreme. No, it's straight down what the Bible says.
It absolutely is. That's what the Bible teaches.
And it is just a wicked book. And the one thing we've noticed is a lot of the people we see and talk to are the people who really take it seriously and reach a place in their life where, wow, the Bible simply cannot be trusted as something to live by, because it is so extreme, so bizarre, and so twisted in so many different ways.
Yes, it is.
I want to thank you, Vyckie, so much for being on the show today. If people want to learn more about you, they can go to nolongerquivering.com. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And the Take Heart Project. Now, once again, if you know or you are somebody who has the skills to help out being a treasurer of the project, please get in contact with us or go to takeheartproject.org. And you can help out there. We'll be putting up links on the website.
Lots of links.
Lots and lots of links. We have lots to share here and so much to read. I'm Deanna Joy Lyons.
I'm Rich Lyons.
Come laugh with me.
Thank you for listening to the Living After Faith podcast with Rich and Deanna Joy Lyons. Living After Faith is a podcast designed to help you as you leave religion and move forward with your life. We are the official podcast of RecoveringReligionists.com, a recovery group founded by Dr. Darrell Ray, the author of The God Virus. The music for this show is provided by Morrison's Prophecy. See livingafterfaith.com for a link to more music from Morrison's Prophecy. We welcome your feedback, and you can find phone numbers and email addresses at livingafterfaith.com, at facebook.com/livingafterfaith, and follow us on Twitter at LAF with me.